We have a massive Toronto Maple Leafs trade update to go over today as Brad Treliving has come out and spoke out and revealed his master plan as the trade deadline approaches. We're also going to be going over multiple other reports that have come out revealing some very interesting details surrounding the Leafs trade plans as trades are going to come to a fruition very, very soon. Stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we get into it, a quick reminder, if you're part of the 70% who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. Thank you guys for your continued support. We're on the road to 15,000 subscribers. If you want to help us towards that goal, hit that subscribe button. But Darius, there's a lot to go over today, and trades are going to be coming to a fruition very soon, not only just for the Leafs, but across the NHL. The trade deadline is approaching, and Brad Treliving has come out and revealed some very interesting details. And we also have some other reports. So let's start with this here. From Luke Fox. Within the Leafs organization, there is greater internal belief in this season's style of play, coaching experience, standings position, leading to a stronger intention to make a more serious push in the mid-season trade market compared to last winter. So we've had a lot of conversations here on the channel and of course in the live streams talking about when this team is rolling. Of course, they've lost 2 in a row, so things have started to tail off a little bit. But again, they are looking like one of the best regular season teams in the NHL, especially this season, and the standings prove that. And it seems like at this point, the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to go, not necessarily all in, but push for a much bigger trade than we initially thought.
Yeah, it's looking that way at least. And I think that makes sense on paper because the Leafs are playing well, right? They've lost the last 2 games in a row. That much is true, and they haven't been great losses, but although no loss is great, but they've been playing really, really well and a caliber of hockey that I think can translate to the playoffs, unlike what we've seen in previous years, the last 6 or so years, right? And there have been years in there, like last year, where Treliving even, came out at one point and said, like, I don't know if we're going to make a big splash here because we're not playing great. Like, I don't know if it makes sense to spend all these assets on this team, the way that they're currently constructed and the way that they're playing. And we saw it a couple of years ago too with Kyle Dubas, even when he was still GM. He said, you know what, this team does not deserve a guy at the trade deadline, does not deserve to be, rewarded with another player. So we have seen that in the past, but this year, I mean, it makes sense. They're first in the Atlantic still, obviously in a fight there with the Florida Panthers, but they're playing a really good caliber of hockey for the most part this season. And I think that they have, at this point, earned the trust of their GM to go out and make a pretty big move.
Yeah, and I mean, you have a new coach, you have a new play style. There's a lot of different things that are ongoing with this team. And as you start to look at what it means going forward, again, within the Leafs organization, not only just the standings, but the style of play, the coaching experience, all these different things. And then Brad Treliving comes out earlier today, and said he doesn't believe it's realistic to acquire a center that is better than Matthews or Tavares. He's targeting a center that's reliable on both sides of the puck and can add offense. What you want and sometimes what's available are two different things, so we'll keep looking. So it's nice. I mean, Brad Treliving has always been very transparent with what they're looking for and how their trade plans and things like that are starting to come to fruition here. But it seems like they're not going to be going for basically what he's saying here. They're not going to go for a second line center at the trade deadline, that there aren't many of them available, but we'll dive into a couple targets in a minute here. It seems like nonetheless, they are going to look to add someone who is responsible defensively that fits in a Craig Berube style of play, but can also add some offense to help give a bit of a thump to that third line and, maybe fourth line, depending on what it is, probably third line. And obviously Max Domi has been occupying the third line center for a while. He can move to wing or he can move down and up depending on how you do things. I mean, we see Steven Lorentz playing first line left wing tomorrow. What are your thoughts on this quote here? It's a very interesting one, and I do think that they are going to make a move. We know that, and it's going to be probably for a third line center, and that brings a few names up, which we'll get into in a minute, but an interesting quote and a pretty transparent quote from the GM.
Yeah, and I know what he's trying to say, but it reads kind of weird too, because not only is it not realistic, I think it's impossible. You're trying to get a better center than Matthews and Tavares, unless you're getting Nathan McKinnon or Connor McDavid. That's impossible. That's not happening. So obviously they're not going after a second line center. They're trying to go after a guy who can play third line center that can take the load off of Matthews and Tavares at times, who can play the matchup game, right? And to me, it's screaming one player specifically, and he plays for the Flyers, and we've talked about him before. And I think it's Scott Laughton. I think it is Scott Laughton that they're trying to target because he is a guy that can play a two-way game. He's, he doesn't have too many points this season, but he's responsible, defensively. He's from here, another guy who probably would want to play for the Leafs, right? Because he grew up here. And I think he would make a great acquisition because of the way he plays. I think that it would translate well to the Craig Berube style. And I can see him taking on harder matchups. He's the type of player that checks really well. And I think he can take on some of those other center matchups. So then it frees up Matthews to have an opportunity to play against another team's third line, or maybe just a matchup that the other team would not want because maybe they have a second line center that's too offensively minded. And we don't know who the Leafs are going to play in the playoffs this year. The bottom half of the East is crazy so far this season. A lot of musical chairs going on, but I think this is a guy that you should probably look at and maybe even target if you're the Leafs. Like, definitely go after this guy because it just makes sense for what they're looking for. It makes sense.
And reports are agreeing with you. And also, you can see here Scott Laughton scored against the Leafs on Sunday, a team that tried to acquire him from the Flyers in the past. Philadelphia is willing to listen. I'm sure Toronto won't be the only team that pokes the deadline. Then, of course, in the fourth period, the Leafs, among other teams, are expected to poke around. Scored against the Leafs Sunday. So the same report. Very interesting. And as you look at Scott Laughton, you look at the fit, there's a bunch of different things. Laughton scored against the Maple Leafs Sunday night, again for the third time. This comes as no surprise. Toronto's been interested in the past. Toronto tried to acquire him a couple years ago. And he would be a good fit for the Leafs at their third line center position. And again, in this season, through 40 games, he has 9 goals and 13 assists, which fits very much so the narrative that Brad Treliving kind of revealed today, that what they're looking for. He'll fit Craig Brube's style of play. He's gritty. He's responsible defensively, also responsible offensively, and can add a bit of a punch. 9 goals is still pretty solid. Again, it's in 40 games, on track for 20-ish goals, which isn't anything crazy. But as you look to kind of, make the edges better of this team. We know the core is going to give you what they give. And if they don't perform in the playoffs, adding a Scott Laughton, that's not going to matter when playoffs come. But if they start to perform, you're now going up against, depending on who you play, the good matchups, adding a guy like this, and also to help push for that first spot in the Atlantic, which is very important. And it's not just the playoffs, it's also obviously helping with that. We've seen some things regarding Brock Nelson, Yanni Gourde, all these different things. And it would include a first round pick. So a lot of these guys, it becomes very interesting now to see how they're going to go about it. Yanni Gourde's another name that's been brought up in the past here. But for Scott Laughton, I like the idea. I think he adds a bit of exactly what Brad Treliving is looking for. The question is what it would take to get him. Will Nick Robertson be traded? All these different things are questions that are going to have to be answered.
Yeah, the Flyers know that the Leafs tried to acquire this player before, right? So the price is probably going to be up there because a lot of other teams would probably be interested in this player too, but it just makes sense to me. This is a player that is exactly what you need in your lineup. And we know a couple things for sure. The Leafs are looking for a third line center, and they're looking probably for some defense help too, right? Whether it be left or right-handed. They're looking for maybe another piece there to add on defense. So we know for sure they're targeting a centerman, right? They're not looking for any more wings. Domi can move to the wing. I think he's better suited on the wing, and I think a lot of his struggles are because he's played center almost all season. We saw it last year. He started at center. He struggled. He moved to the wing. He had a better second half, right? So he's more effective on the wing, and I think they need another player there. But again, Scott Laughton to me just makes sense. I like the way he plays. He's a good checker. He can play the matchup game. I think the Leafs might be looking at a guy, oh, can he chip in for a couple goals here and there? Can he play defense, right? He's a guy that I think can play the matchup game. He can take that very seriously. And in a playoff series, we've seen before that can win or lose you a playoff series sometimes, right? So I think that it just makes sense for the Maple Leafs to target a guy like that. He's not the biggest player, but he plays bigger than he is. So need more guys like that. And he's a guy to me that screams like he just hates losing. Like you know what I mean? Like it's not like he loves winning or anything like that. Like he does love winning, of course, but he just hates to lose. That's what I'm trying to say with the Flyers. He's the type of guy that's bought into the obviously Tortorella mindset there as well. So I love guys like that, and I think it would be a no-brainer for the Leafs.
And it translates well, the Tortorella mindset into the Craig Berube mindset, albeit with Berube a bit more tame. And let us know down below what your thoughts are. Maybe he'd give a jump to the power play to make it, whether he's in the power play or not, if he gets traded here. That team, this Leafs desperately need more power play goals. So maybe some winning mindset will help towards that. Even though I do think that the Leafs are going to bounce back into tomorrow night's game against the Stars. Let us wrap it up. Let us know down below what your thoughts are on this deal. Do you think it should happen? And also let us know what your thoughts are on Brad Treliving's comments. He continues to improve this team. Thank you guys for watching. See you later.